Morning, I'm Mr. SS.Nguni from Ding High School under Herokola District, and today we'll be looking at production factors, namely its land, labor, capital, and management. Thank you. Right, so we can start as of now. So we're saying that in agriculture, we've got these four production factors. They are namely four. Number one, we look at land. Number two, we look at labor. Number three, we look at capital. Four, we look at management. But we're going to start off with land. So I'm with Zindlenge. She's going to do capital and management. So I'll start off with land. So firstly, we need to define the concept land as a production factor. One, land, it is said that it is the natural resource, okay, which is to say that land is what is available to the farmer and all its natural resources. And which are those resources if we are to mention them? We're looking at vegetation, we're looking at soil, we're also looking at water that is available to the farmer. But also land has got what we call the economic importance, the economic functions, but also we are going to look into what can one do in order to improve productivity of land. As we all know that land at some point will reach its maximum production purpose or output. So we're going to look into firstly at the economic functions of land. The first one is to say that it can be used as a collateral when applying for loan at a financial institution. So in other words, as you all know that land is a long-term asset. In case you're applying for a loan, you need to have a collateral. So you can use land as a collateral because it is what we call an asset. So you can use land. So secondly, it provides space for agricultural activities. Namely, we can focus into one, animal production, but also we can focus also into plant production. So we need space for that. So as you know that land is limited. So this space that we're talking about, which is for agricultural activities, it is also limited, but we need to have space for agriculture. But thirdly, it says that it provides food for humans and animals. The main focus here is animals. So we're going to look into animals in terms of production, because we farm animals for production, which might be milk, which might be meat and eggs. So in order for us to get that, we need to have land to produce maize, so that we can use maize as concentrate to start off with, maybe for what? For our farm animals, which might be non ruminants. But also we look to say that it is also a source of minerals for what? To make fertilizer. We have what we call potash, which is used as a fertilizer with potassium. So we use that, we find them in soil, because you know that minerals, they can either be mined or they can be synthetic. So some of those which are said to be originally from the soil, then soil can provide them or land can provide them. Now also need to look into the economic characteristics now of land. So the first one we're going to look at is to say that it varies in production potential. What is to say by that? It means to say that land as a production factor, one, it says that each and every piece of land has got a production potential that varies. It's not the same in every space of land that one has. So it varies. But number two, we tend to say that it can be sold and bought. And it can be bought and sold at a price, which is linked to the third point, which is that the value of land appreciates over time. So if we are to buy land now in 2019, just a piece of land, let's say you buy it for 3.5 million, depending on the size of the land. But in few years to come, that value might be doubled, or it might even be tripled, because land, it appreciates over time. Because as you buy land, there are improvements that you make, there are buildings, and also there are other inputs that one might put in land, so as to have its value increased over a period of time. That is to say, its value appreciates over a period of time. But also, it is said that the amount of land available is what is fixed. Meaning to say that land can only be found at one particular location. It cannot be moved in a way. It can only be found in one particular location. That is why, firstly, we looked into saying that agricultural land is limited. That is to say that land is fixed. It can only be found in one place or in one location. But moving on now, how can one then increase productivity of land? The first one needs to do is to do what? Is to improve soil fertility. How does one then improve soil fertility? One, it is said that the first step to do before you can even have those inputs of fertilizers in the soil, you need to firstly test for the presence of minerals in the soil. And then you need to put what is deficient in the soil. You need not to put something that you think the soil needs, but you need to put what exactly the soil needs. That is why we say that the first part is to do what? Is to improve soil fertility. But the first thing to do is to do what? Is to test for the nutrients present, but also to look into what you are requiring from the soil or what your crops that are going to plant need. Then you need to put fertilizer in terms of that. Improving water management. So one, for crops to grow, they need water. And water is a very scarce resource. We live in South Africa, which is called a drought country. We are a country that is said to be a water limited country. So how can one improve water management in agriculture? One, the first thing to do is to have watering systems. That is what you need to do firstly. But also, water can also be it can also be harvested. You can have dams to this soil. Now, what you need to do now, in terms of improving water management, you need to manage your irrigation system such that you do not flood the soil. Because we remember, if we can take our memories back to grade 11, we focus more on soil, where we looked at conditions affecting soil and water. Waterlogging was one of them. That if you fail to manage your water properly, then you have a condition called what? Waterlogging. So in this case, we say that you need to manage your water properly so as to have this soil producing up to its maximum production. But also, consolidation of uneconomical land units. It is said that it is of no use to have maybe 3 hectares of land, but only to find that there is 2 hectares that is in production. The other land is laid dormant. It is not in use. So what you need to do now is to have those small units, to put them together so that you can have the maximum production of your land put to its capacity. Then lastly, you need to do what we call intercropping. So intercropping, some call it double cropping. So what is meant by that? It means to say that you can have maize, but also within the rows of maize, you can also plant something else. That is intercropping. In a way, you are maximizing profits of your land. And also you are making sure that in one space of land you can have more production at once. So that is how one can improve land productivity. When also looking at the last part, it is said the law of diminishing returns. What does it mean by that? It is said that it is an economic concept. What does it state? It states that as a farmer, we have this tendency of trying to improve soil productivity by adding some inputs. But it says that as you have one input, keep adding on one input and keeping others constant, you will at some point, or the land will at some point, reach a stage whereby the production per yield will not improve, or the production per hectare will not improve, because you have now decided to focus on one input and leaving others aside. So at one point you will have a point whereby as much as you put fertilizers, but the soil will not give you the expected results. So I have a graph on the side to show that what is meant by this, the law of diminishing returns. Still, it takes us back to grade 11, where we said that when testing for soil nutrients, we look into what the soil has. and also we add what the soil needs, not what we think the soil needs. So as we look into that, the graph on the board, what does it say about yield of diminishing returns? It says that, as I've just mentioned before, that as you have those inputs, you keep adding those inputs, but you keep others constant. The land will at some point reach this stage, which is the maximum production. At 15, you can see that this is our maximum production. This is our maximum production at 15. You keep on adding those inputs. Now, from 0 to 5, we see that the graph is increasing. Okay? So at 5, it's increasing. At 10, it's increasing. At 15, it's increasing and it reaches its maximum production. Meaning what? Meaning no matter how much you can add now, the soil can no longer produce beyond this because it has reached its maximum production capacity. That is also linked to what we spoke of in grade 11 in speaking of what? Of soil minerals, toxicity, sufficiency, and deficiency. Where we have, at one point, we might have a dip in the graph, which shows that now the soil is not starting to give you what you're expecting, but what we have been putting all these years is now starting to become toxic. So it will now show that it will decline over time. So this is what is meant by the law of diminishing returns. So it says that here, if we are to read it word by word, I'll start from here. It says a point will be reached where production no longer increases with increased input or units of what of input, as we can see that 25 and 15 is the same because it is said that 15 is the maximum of inputs that you can have, but it can no longer produce beyond that. But how do we then go into an exam preparing for such questions? So underneath this, I think there are a set of questions that we need to look at. Yeah, I think we've covered that we have looked at. Now, we are going to focus solely on what, or on land as a production factor. We're going to focus on questions or not on land. Questions. So we need to check how are these asked in an exam. Right? Okay. So now, we started off by saying that we have the functions of land as a production factor. So now, here are some of the questions that one might encounter in an exam. To say maybe write down 4 functions of land as a production factor. It is not specific to saying are those the economic functions of land or what. But also it says 3 techniques or methods of increasing land productivity, as we've just mentioned earlier before, that you can have proper water management, you can add fertilizers, but also you can consolidate those uneconomical land units. So if I can have another set of questions or on the below this, some below this. Pertaining land. Okay. Now you can also have a case of this nature where it says the table below shows the amount of fertilizer applied and the quantity of potatoes produced on piece of land. So what you can see here is that with the inputs, we can also see what? The outputs. So it says here, the input is how much? Is 5 bags of fertilizers. But how much is the output or the yield? Then you are getting 10 bags of potatoes. With 10 inputs, we're getting 20. With 15, we're getting 35. But once again, with 20, we are getting 35, you see. With 25, we are getting 36. 30, we are getting 35. Meaning to say that the question now says, identify the economic characteristics shown in the data above or on this. As we can see from the graph that I've presented, that this speaks to the law of diminishing returns. if one can recall very well. It speaks straight to the law of what? Of diminishing returns, this, as we can see. But also, if we are to look at the relationship between the inputs and potato yield, it also speaks to the graph that we spoke of earlier, or that was shown earlier, that as inputs of fertilizers, the production will also increase, but up to a certain point whereby they will no longer increase beyond this. So this speaks directly to the law of what? Of diminishing returns. If I can have maybe the last set of questions. I think there are two. Okay. Now, from there, you may also be asked maybe to draw a line graph based on the table above. Now, when one is plotting a graph, there is one key to understanding how one is to do this. And one is to understand the variables in order to correctly draw this graph. So we're having here the inputs and the yield. So we need to look into those dependent variables and independent variables when plotting this graph. So we know for sure that outputs depend on the inputs, which is to say that the inputs are bags of fertilizers and the output is yield, be it per ton of hectare or what. But it says lastly, define the law of diminishing returns, as it has just been stated that from this graph, as you look at, from this table as you look at, it clearly states that as you have those inputs, they will increase productivity of the land to a point whereby the land will no longer produce beyond its maximum production output or capacity. I think pertaining land, those are key facts that we have covered, unless one needs some more clarity or needs some more activities based on that. But we can always look into our examination guidelines. We can always look into our previous exam papers based specifically on land. So I'm not sure if we do have some inputs or if we do have some questions or some point of clarity that you need on. Pungoshe, ni writes, do you still need those? Do you need clarity, or you've just been covered in all aspects of this first presentation on land?
Hi, morning colleagues. My name is Zinhle and then my surname is Ngema. So SS.Nguni with capital. So when we're speaking of capital, we are mainly looking at the money or assets to start the business. So capital can come in two forms. It can be in a form of money or it can be in a form of assets. So when we're speaking of assets, we're looking at anything that has got a value for money. Like when you're owning a house, you do not have the money in your account, but then you do have something that has got a value for money. So whenever you decide to sell that house, you can have a money in return. So that is what we refer to as assets. So why do we need capital? We need capital so that we can be able to start a business. There is no business that can be started without any form of capital. So when we look at capital, we divide it into three categories. Number one, we've got a fixed capital. A fixed capital, it is a capital that is invested on durable items, such as a land or buildings. So whenever we invest on long-term assets, then we refer to that as a fixed capital. And then we've got a movable capital. Movable capital is usually invested on medium-term assets. Those medium-term assets, they include machinery, vehicles. They can be paid for a period of time that is from 5 to 10 years. Then we've got a short-term capital. When we're looking at a short-term capital, we sometimes refer to it as e-working capital or e-production capital. E-working capital or production capital, it is directly involved in production. That is why we call it a working capital. It can only be used for one season and then we cannot use it again. A very good example of a working capital, it's fertilizers. So whenever I apply fertilizer on soil, I can never utilize the fertilizer again. So I've been able to use it just for that particular season. Another example is the seeds. So when it's a planting season, we grow plants using seeds. We can never use the same seeds again. At the very same time, we can't have a farm la siyenza khona planting, but then we do not use any seeds. So our seeds are directly involved in production. Chemicals like pesticides and fertilizers, they're directly involved in production. So that is why we refer to them as a working capital. So working capital, it can be paid within a short period of time. Even in a 1 month period, you can be able to pay back a working capital. Even in a 1 month period, you can be able to raise a working capital. You don't need to wait for like many years to raise a working capital. Even when I'm standing here, if you want to have a working capital, you can just contact me and then I can loan you a working capital. It's not a big amount that needs to be paid in a long period of time. So how do we obtain capital? How is the capital created? So number one, we've got a production capital. What is it that you're speaking on when you are speaking of production capital? When I'm having a farm, and then I'm producing something with an intention of starting a bigger farm, then it's going to be a production capital. Let me make an example. If I've got a horticultural production where I'm producing spinach, each and every season I produce spinach, and then I sell that spinach, I put the money on the account. But then I'm having a small plot. Then I'm having a hope that in future I'll have something bigger than what I'm having. So if I've got enough money in future to buy a bigger land than the one that I used to have, so the source of capital that I've used, it's a production capital. Then we've got savings. Savings, when you put aside money on your salary or on your wages with the hope of starting a farming enterprise, then we refer to it as savings. As I'm working as an educator, if I can decide to resign from the department and then I take my GEPF and then I use it to start a business, then the source of capital is going to be a savings capital. Then we've got credit. A credit, it is the money that you obtain from the commercial banks. So that money, when we return it to the department, to the bank, it goes with interest. Then another form of capital that is not listed there, it's the grant. How does the grant differ from a loan? A grant is given by the governmental trust. So the grant does not come back with the interest. Sometimes they don't even make a follow-up if you have returned the grant. For an example, if the government says, if you want to start a cattle farm, I'll give you 40 cattle. Then once your farm is successful, you're going to return my cattle to me. So that is what we refer to as a grant. So it usually comes up with the government trust to support the small emerging farmers. A very good example of the trust that used to support people who wants to start business is Umsobomvu Trust Fund. I think you can still remember them, that trust funds collect. So Umsobomvu was giving people grant, but not a loan. So we've got problems that are associated with capital. The first problem, the capital is scarce. Most of the people like to start the agricultural business, but what they usually explain to us is that they do not have money to start the business. The reason being, the capital is scarce. And then the capital is cost. How is the capital cost? Once you are taking a credit, then the credit comes back with an interest. Let's say the interest rate is currently sitting at 10%. I'm making an example. So if you go to the bank and then you borrow 100 rand, that 100 rand will cost you 10 rands. So that is a good indication that the capital is costly. So now there is no farming enterprise that can operate at 100 rands. So when you are going to start a farming enterprise, we're looking at something way more than that. So if 100 rands is costing 10 rands, so can you just imagine what 100,000 can cost you? And then another problem that is associated with capital is depreciation. So some of the assets, they've got a tendency of losing their value over time. more especially the medium-term assets, which includes the machinery and the vehicles. They lose their value over time. And then another problem associated with capital here is overcapitalization. So some people get access to capital, but then they do not know how to use it well. So they ended up doing what we call overcapitalization. Overcapitalization is whereby you're buying more than what you need. So you are overcapitalizing. Or you've got more land than what you can use. So the unused land, we refer to it as overcapitalization. So when we're moving down here, we've got activities for this small portion of work that we have just went through. Okay, the first question is that mention 4 problems associated with capital as a production factor. So it's going to be very easy for the learners to recall because they can just go to their summary and then they can be able to pick up the problems that are associated with capital as a production factor, which includes depreciation, the cost, scarcity, overcapitalization, and sometimes undercapitalization. So when we're moving on to question number 2, we are given in a box the land, the buildings, the livestock, machinery, fuel, and pesticides. So what is expected from the learner is to take these examples of capital and put them into the category that they belong to. For an example, a movable capital, we've got an example of what? Of machinery. A fixed capital, we've got an example of land and buildings. A working capital, then we've got a fuel, we've got pesticides. Yes, it's a good example of a working capital. So name 3 sources of capital. A learner can simply go to the chalkboard summary and then note 3 sources of capital that we have mentioned. And then another way that we can use to assess this, we can use a scenario. So it says, a family in rural area of the country decided to pursue farming. The father worked for a construction company for 20 years and received a pension package of 189,000, which he invested in land to start farming enterprise. The family had 2 legal capital and they approached Vukuzenzele Trust for a grant. They were given a total of 80,000. The family used this grant to purchase irrigation system for 7,000, a tractor for 58,000, and 15,000 was for pesticides, seeds, and fertilizers. Before we go to the questions, now let us simply highlight the few points that we have spoke on. Number 1, the father was working, and then we've got 189,000 of a pension package. So what do we know about this 189,000 of a pension package? It forms a part of capital that we refer to as savings. And then he invested on land. What is it that we know about land? In land, it forms in a fixed capital. The family had 2 legal capital and they approached Vukuzenzele Trust. And then what type of capital did they obtain there? They obtained a grant, which is far different from loan. And then they were given a grant of 80,000. So now the irrigation system was 7,000. The irrigation system, we said it forms what we call a working capital. And then fertilizers and pesticides. So let us move on and see the questions for this case study. Number 1, tabulate 3 forms of capital used by the family in the case study. 3 forms of capital. Number 1, we had a savings capital. Number 2, we had a grant. And then thirdly, we had a production capital. 5.2, name 2 sources of capital and give the example of each. Number 1, we had a working capital. Fertilizers, they were good examples of working capital. And then we've got a medium-term capital, which was a vehicle, and then Nama machinery. Then now we're moving on. We are looking at a financial management system. So when we are having a capital, most of the time it comes in a form of finance. So these finance, they need to be managed. How do we manage finances? We manage finances using the financial records. So when we are using the financial records, how does that assist us? Number one, it assists us to manage the capital of a farm. If you've got financial records, it becomes very easier to know what have you done with your money, what is happening with the money, and then how much you can expect in the future. As we are all sitting here, we are all very keen to see our pay slips. How much are we receiving? How much is deducted? How are we spending it? And what adjustment that needs to be done. And then it assists us to draw a budget. And then when we're applying for money in the tertiary institution, then we can use our financial records. A bank statement, it's a financial record. So when we're applying for whatever type of loan or whatever type of finance from the finance institution, then they want to see your bank statements. And then when you are also using it for tax purposes, then they want to see your bank statements as well. So we've got different financial records. Number one, we've got an inventory. As the title states it's an inventory of assets. So on a farm, we've got assets and then we've got liabilities. The belongings of a farmer, we call them assets. What the farmer owes, we call it liabilities. So in an inventory, we don't keep what the farmer owes, but we keep what the farmer owns. So usually when we get into an exam, a learner is usually given a list of assets and liabilities. And then the learner is instructed to create an inventory of assets. So what is it that is expected from the learner? Is to list all the assets. Once the learner has listed the assets, then he needs to separate the inventories for current assets, movable assets, and then fixed assets. Do you remember when we were speaking of the capital, we said we've got a fixed, a movable, and then the current. Our current assets are the ones that can be paid in a short period of time. So we're looking at a period from a month up to a period of a year. And then our movable assets, they are usually paid from a period of 5 to 10 years. And then our fixed assets, they are usually paid from a period of 10 to 20 years or even more than that. Now, one of the things that usually confuse our learners when it comes to this, when they get into the exam, we don't speak of it as a fixed asset, but usually we use bond, the money that is used to pay bond. So learners do not have any idea what the bond is. Then they take a bond and then they say a bond is an asset. So in their inventory of assets, you find a bond. Once there's a liability in the inventory of assets, then your financial record is no longer correct. Because when we're assessing this, we give our assets with their values. Then at the end of the day, the learner needs to come up with the total amount of assets. So once you add the liability, then your inventory is going to give you a wrong net at the end of your calculation. And then number 2, we're moving on to cash analysis book. The cash analysis book is a financial record. It's a financial record that has got a money that is coming in and then the money that is going out. So the money that is coming in, we call it a receipt. And then the money that is going out, we call it payment. So now, usually, when we speak of this, receipt. Look, what you refer to as a receipt, that is what we call a receipt. It's a proof that there was money that was coming in. And then this transaction is done daily and summarized monthly. So on daily basis on a farm, when we sell something, we record it. When we receive money, we do the record on daily basis. And then on monthly basis, we do a summary. As I'm continuing with explaining the financial records, you'll see when we start to use a cash analysis book. And then we've got a balance sheet. Okay, the balance sheet, it is the summary of assets and then the liabilities. What is the purpose of doing a balance sheet? A balance sheet, it determines the net worth of a business. Okay, let us go back to the first explanation that I gave you. When I was defining assets, I said it's anything that has got a value for money. Then we refer to it as an asset. So now, if a farmer does not have much money on the account, but the farmer is owning land, the farmer is owning some machinery, the farmer has got livestock and then some crops, then the business does not have money as such, but we will never speak of the business as the one who's making profit, but a business in a net worth. Where does that net worth of a business come from? It comes from the asset. It's the worth of a business. To be more practical to you, if a person does not have money in his or her bank, but then let us make an example of a male, but then he's owning some cattle, then we refer to that man as the one who is rich. Reason being, unani assets. So these assets, we keep them in the balance sheet. And then we've got AMA liabilities. AMA liabilities, it's anything that has got a money for value, but the farmer is owing it, does not own it. Usually, farmers do not have the big machineries, so they hire them. The fact that they are on a farm, they are liability. They need to pay for them, for those machineries. They do not belong to them. So now, when we are doing a balance sheet, we keep our assets and the liabilities. How does the balance sheet work? Number one, you take the assets, you list them. You take the liabilities, you list them. Now, after listing them, start to group them according to their lifespan. What is it that I'm speaking on when I'm saying you group them according to their lifespan? So we've got short-term assets, medium-term assets, long-term assets. And then you go to liabilities, you say this is a short-term, this is a medium-term, this is a long-term. So once you start to say short-term asset, once you're done with the short-term asset, you give a total. Once you're done with the medium-term assets, you give a total. Once you are done with the long-term assets, you give them a total. And then at the end, you're going to add your totals, then you're going to get the sum up total of the assets. So we said these give us the net worth of a business. When you start to have a net worth, you say the total of assets minus the total of liabilities. So if you've got a positive number, that means the business is worth it. Then if the number is negative, that means the business is not making any profit. So there is no point for us to continue that business, or we need to change our business strategy. And then this is about an income statement. In income statement, you are speaking of all the income and the expenditure for a specific period. So in income statement, it gives us the money that is coming in, what monies did we receive and what monies did we spend. Then how does the income statement differs from the balance sheet? The income statement, it determines the profit of a business. So a profit of a business, it speaks of it in terms of cash. And here we speak of the income statement, sinama assets. But we'll speak of the money that we have received from selling something. Like when you go to the income statement, you speak we'll find us speaking of cattle sales. So from cattle sales, this is what we have received. But in a balance sheet, we say cattle. Because when we are speaking of a balance sheet, we are speaking of cattle as an asset. But then when we are speaking of cattle here, we're looking at them as something that can give us income. So we sell them so that we can get the money. And then from there, we look at it if the business is making a profit or the business is running on a loss. So in an income statement, we've got what we call overheads. So on the overheads, these are the things that keeps the business running. For an example, telephone, computers for the internet, So we communicate with our clients using a telephone, and then we market our product using computers. These things are not directly involved in production, but they keep the business running. We can never have something that is called a telephone farm. But then on a cattle farm, we use telephone to market our product or to contact our clients. So these are the overheads of the business. And then electricity as well. Then we've got what we call fixed cost and then variable cost. When we're speaking of fixed costs, are the costs that do not vary with the level of production. Let me make an example. Rent. If we are under lease and then we are due to pay 3,000 rand each and every month. If we sell 10 cattle, our rent is going to remain at 3,000. If we sell 20 cattle, our rent is going to remain at 3,000. If we sell 100 cattle, our rent is going to remain at 3,000. So the cost is fixed. Whether the production is increasing or decreasing, but the costs are fixed. And then variable cost. Variable cost, they vary with the level of production. When the production increases, the cost increases. When the production decreases, the cost decreases. A very good example of this is water. So when we've got more cattle on a farm, more water is going to be used. So the cost is going to increase. When we've got more cattle on a farm and then we're milking them, what is going to happen? The electricity costs are going to increase. The lesser the cattle we have, the electricity costs are going to go down. So all of these things, we find them in an income statement. So now, when we are working on an income statement, we need to classify if it's an income or it's an expenditure. So once it's an income, then we group it together. If it's an expenditure, then we group it together. Then we calculate the total of the expenditure and then the total of the income. And then we come up with the profit of a business. So now we're going to say money coming in minus money spent, which is versus total in if the business is running on a profit or the business is running on a loss. Then we've got budget. Well, we work with this on a daily basis. A budget is a document. A budget is a document that shows how much you think you've spent and earn over a period of time. I know some of you colleagues are very surprised if I say it's a document, because we're thinking of our own budget that is only in one page. So it depends with the size of the enterprise. The bigger the enterprise, the bigger the size of the budget. For an example, here in South Africa, from morning till afternoon, we will deliver a budget speech. So that means the enterprise, it is very big in size. So a budget is a document. It shows us how we think we'll spend money and earn in a future period of time. So a budget, we divide it into three categories. Number one, we've got an enterprise budget. Enterprise budget is only for one enterprise. Let me make an example. If you've got a piggery and then you've got a vegetable farm, you are doing both pigs and vegetables in the same farm. So when you are doing an enterprise budget, you'll budget for pigs only and then you'll budget for veggies only. But then when you are doing a whole farm budget, you combine both veggies and pigs and then you start to do your budget. A partial budget, it is when you're doing an investigation. If the business is successful and then you need to make change on your farm operation. We made an example of piggery and then the vegetable farm. So if you are doing a partial budget, you only focus on one enterprise and then you see how much are you spending and how much are you earning over time, and then you decide whether you continue with the other enterprise or not, or you stick to one enterprise. And then we've got a cash flow statement. Cash flow statement is about the movement of funds through the business. Remember, we spoke of an income statement. The income statement, we said it is done daily and then summarized monthly. Using the information that you obtain from the income statement, you use that information to draw a cash flow statement. So a cash flow statement, what does it contain? It contains the income, the expenditure, and then it says the profit and then the loss of a business. Then how does the cash flow statement differs from the income statement? Number one, the counterfactor is the period. Income statement is done daily and summarized monthly. So when you are given a sheet, they'll tell you if it's for 1 month, then it's an income statement. If it's more than 1 month, then it's going to be a cash flow statement. And then another factor that differentiates the cash flow statement from the income statement, it is the opening balance and then the closing balance. When we're starting the business, how much we're having, and then from the point of compiling the statements, what balance are we sitting on. So these are the 6 statements that we're having. So most of the time, our learners have got difficulties when it comes to working with this. But then the key factor is to know how to define the statement and then the purpose of the statement. What do we use this statement for? Because once a learner cannot be able to explain the use of the statement, automatically he or she is going to confuse the statement. If the learner does not know the use of a balance sheet and then the income statement, the learner will start to confuse the two. So now let us look at the example of the activity that we have on the board. So here we've been stated the statement that you are working on, it's a budget. So this is what we are expecting to earn over time. And then this is how we think we're gonna spend over time. Okay, so identify one cost item that can be repaid over a period of 5 years. So a learner needs to go there and then see what item that is going to be repaired over a period of 5 years. And then give reason for your answer in 1.1. So the question in 1.1 for the answer, we're looking for a tractor, and then the reason a tractor is a medium-term asset, and then it is also prone to a depreciation. Refer to the data above and calculate the highest income generated. So how do we calculate the highest income generated? So we are adding 2 things that we said they're going to give us money, which forms an income of our enterprise, and then we come up with the total. Indicates in the budget about 2 problems that can be associated with this medium-term asset. So our medium-term asset, it's a loan that we have raised to buy a tractor. Number 1, a tractor is prone to depreciation, and then since we bought a tractor using a loan, then the capital is expensive. Remember we said a loan comes with an interest. Use the formula to calculate the profit of this enterprise. Show all your calculations. So now, how do we calculate the profit? So we said money coming in minus the money that is going out, and then we come up with a profit. So we're stating if the business is running on a loss or the business is making a profit. Okay, activity 2. An emerging broiler and egg farmer wants to draw up a cash flow budget for a month, opening from a 0 balance. Workers' wages cost 4,000 per week, chicken feed cost 7,000 per week, electricity is 2.5 per week, and some other cost amounts to 15,000 per week. The farmer's income consists of eggs sold for cash at 10,000 per week. Once a month, broilers are sold at 50,000. Draw a mini cash flow budget for 1 week. So we're drawing this for 1 week. And then what is it that is expected from a learner? We need to separate the money that is coming in from the money that is going out. And then you determine the net income of a business. So we said the money that has come in for 1 month, So now here is the key. So we're doing this for 1 month. But then what is it that you need to note? All these activities were done on weekly basis. So all these activities were done on weekly basis, except this. This is the only thing that was sold on monthly basis. So now a learner needs to take these expenses and convert them into a month instead of a week. And then from there, a learner needs to explain if the business is making income or the business is running on a loss based on the cash flow statement. Okay, then we've got activity number 3. I think this is the last activity on capital. So we've got items that are listed there. We've got cattle sales, we've got marketing levy, we've got telephone bill, sheep sales, electricity, and grain feed. So what is it that is expected from a learner is to classify the following and the items under the following headings. Number 1, income. So cattle sales, they give us income, so it's money that is coming in. Variable cost, the one that varies with the level of production. So once there is high production, then electricity is going to increase. And then overheads, marketing levy is going to increase as well if the production increases. Overheads are the ones that are responsible for the operation of a business, but they are not directly involved in the production, as we have explained it. The electricity is a very good example of an overhead. So now you use a formula to calculate the net income of this enterprise. So in net income, it's going to be income minus expenditure. So what is it that is expected from the learner? Is to give the total of all the monies that are coming in and the total of all the monies that are going out. And then from there, money coming in minus money coming out. And then we're going to get the net income of a business. And then Mr. Nguni is coming in with labor. Then I'll see you shortly with management.
So we're now moving on to our third production factor, which is labor. So one, we need to look into saying that firstly we need to understand what labor is. So it is explained as what? As a mental and a physical effort, which is offered by men, and surely in exchange for what? For remuneration of what? For cash. Because no one wants to work for free. So work in order to get what? To get money. So in agriculture, we classify labor into saying that we've got main types of labor. So there are differences between what we call the main types of labor and the classification of labor or classes of labor. So it's something that we need not to confuse. By main types of labor, it is where we're going to look into permanent labor, temporal labor, casual, and also we're going to look into seasonal. But when speaking of classes of labor, it now differs into saying now we've got now this type of labor is now classified as being skilled, or is not classified as being unskilled, or is not classified as being semi-skilled. So that is the main difference between type of labor and classes of labor. So we need not to confuse the two. But firstly, we need to look into what we call the permanent labor. Then we say that all are permanent labors. So now we say that permanent laborers, they work on the farm full-time. They're also called full-time workers. And to give an example, we say we've got tractor drivers and farm foremen. Those are some of the examples of permanent laborers. But also to say that permanent laborers are different from temporal laborers. Why? Because there are some benefits that these permanent laborers receive. To start off with is to say that, number one, we say that they are more job secured. It is not to say that they cannot be retrenched, but we're saying that they are more job secured when speaking of them in terms of what of job security compared to temporal laborers. If I can make a clarification on that by saying that they are more job secured. Let's say someone has been employed in the business for 20 years and has accumulated a quite sizable amount of cash. in his or her pension package or in his or her retirement package, then that person has got a value of some sort in a company. Now let's say a company is running through some rough financial patch. They have got this permanent labor and they've got a temporary labor who has been employed for maybe 2 years. Now in trying to save money, the company will then retrench a temporary labor or someone who has been in the farm for 2 years and leave someone who's been in the farm for 20 years. Why? Because the person has got accumulated so much in the company such that if they are to retrench this person, the company also has got to lose this large amount of money. So that is why we say that there are more jobs secured. But also, they are entitled to some other benefits. An example of those benefits might include the 13th check. That is a bonus at the end of the year. They do receive those. But also, there may be some allowances, like housing allowances, or also even car allowances. Yes, in farms, they do get those. Do not be confused. It's a farm, but still, they must still get those. Now, then we look into temporal workers. So now we're looking into temporal workers. So now, why are they called temporal workers? Now, it is said that they are employed temporarily up until a permanent employee is what is fitted into. Okay, so they are employed temporarily. So we call them temporal workers. So they are called temporal workers. Now, when also looking into them, we say we also got seasonal workers. With seasonal workers, it is said that they are only employed during peak periods. They are not employed at any time of the year, but only during the peak periods. That is to say, which are those peak periods? Maybe during harvesting, they can be employed during those periods because those are what? Those are peak periods. And also I've got what we call the casual workers. Casual workers, it is said that they work less than 24 hours a month and they do not have a contract with their employer. But also, they are not covered by some of the acts as included in the basic conditions of employment. That is to say, they are casual. Some books say that they are only employed for specific tasks, those casual workers. That is to say, maybe someone has been only employed to come in and fix electricity. That is to say, the person is what? Is a casual worker. Is only coming in for that only specific task, which is to what? To fix electricity or to what? To erect fence. Now, also labor as a production factor, there are problems associated with it. As it is also said that there are problems that can also be associated with capital as a production factor. The first problem associated with labor is what we call what? A lack of skills. Why do people shortage of these skills? That is to say that a person has never worked anywhere. A person will have no skill. So skills are shortage in labor. That is the first part. That if you are being employed, they'll say, maybe in a farm, they say, we need someone with 5 years experience. Then you do not have a skill to do that. Then you might end up not being employed because you are lacking that particular skill or that particular experience. Then also labor shortage. Labor shortages might be due to number one, low wages. Remember, we are speaking of a farming environment. So it has come up in news several times where you find that farm workers are being exploited by their employers because they know that they are illiterate and they are given a very less amount at the end of the year. So capital also has an impact of that, wages. And also I've got less attractive working conditions. Remember that in farms, you have to work in very unfavorable conditions. To start off with, to make an example, with dairy farming, In dairy farming, you have to wake up very early in the morning for your milking session. But also you have to leave late for your afternoon milking sessions. But also there are activities that needs to be done on the farm daily. Be it rain or sun. You need to do those activities outdoors. So those conditions are set to what? To be less attractive. And more especially for what? For younger people. Competition. So we tend to lose more workers to more controlled or to more better working condition companies. That is to say, competition. I always say that the competition that I'm speaking of here, I used to say competition might be between two. I often say between farms and firms. That is what I always often talk to when I'm speaking of this. That the competition is between whom and who? It's between farms and firms. One might opt to work in a firm than to work in a farm. Because of what? Because of those low wages, unfavorable working conditions. So we tend to lose more people to what? To firms and not in farms. If you are to speak to a very young person to say, you have these two to work on. You have a farm and a firm. A young person may choose what? A firm and leave a farm. Because in a farm, the person's got to wake up very early in the morning for milking sessions. Or maybe wake up very early in the morning to do what? To cut off timber. So one might choose in a firm because they've got shifts and also they've got what? Better working conditions than in farms. But also the impacts of HIV and AIDS. That what impacts the labor force mostly. What we call the issue of HIV and AIDS. It affects the working environment. It affects labor. Now, then we need to look into say now, how does then HIV and AIDS impact on production on farm? How does it impact on production on farm? How does it impact on production on farm? So we need to look into that. Now, just scroll. There's no need to right click. Just scroll. So now we need to say, how does it impact on productivity? One, productivity decreases. Why? Due to absence from work. Let's say someone needs to go to the doctor or needs to go to the clinic or the hospital for a routine check-up. Then when it has to be absent, and that decreases labor productivity because you cannot have someone to fill in for someone for just one day. So on the day, you will be affected. Loss of skills and experience. Let's say someone loses life due to HIV and AIDS. Then you lose the skill the person has and also the years of experience that person has. Then that's how it impacts the working environment in agriculture. And also, work cannot be completed on time. Why? Because of labor shortages. So the task that is to be done on the day cannot be completed on the allocated time because you are short of labor. Now, then, if we are to look now into saying now, how do we then address the issues of HIV and AIDS? One is to have what we call awareness trainings. So you can have people to come into your business and have those awareness campaigns on people on how to behave and connect themselves in order to what? To avoid or to be not affected with HIV and AIDS. Provide access to condoms. You see this in clinics, there are condoms, but also in some places where people find joy, there's also condoms. The access to them is what is available. Encourage good moral values. That is to say that you need to speak to them that they need not to have multiple sexual partners. They need to have one sexual partner so as to not contract HIV. But also you need to supply vitamins and antiretroviral medication. So that also helps to what? To boost their what? Their immune systems. But also you can establish support groups for those that are already affected and infected. You can have what? The support groups where they can speak openly about their issues without being scared of being violated by others. But also, we look into saying now, how can you then improve or increase productivity of workers? So this can be too general or it can be too scientific. By too general, you can have as many points as possible, but at times we need to look into these very three basic things into saying that how can we improve or labor productivity or how can we increase labor productivities maybe under social conditions or environmental conditions, but also under educational conditions and also under economical conditions. We need to look into how can we increase productivity of workers. To start off with, in terms of economic conditions, how can we increase productivity of laborers? One is to saying that we need to pay them bonuses. So if one knows that at the end of the month, I'll get an extra over and above what I'm receiving if we have reached the target in terms of production, then one will be motivated in working even harder because they know that they will have what? Bonuses. And also you need to pay them higher salaries. They need not to be that much higher, but they need to be what you call the market related salaries. Or they need to be related to the type of job that they are doing. So you need to pay them very well. Supplying farm products at reduced prices. Remember, they are milking daily in the farm. So you need to sell the milk at discount prices. If it's vegetable production, you need to sell them vegetables at a lesser price. Also, you need to provide medical insurance and pension to them. So that in so doing, you are improving in their economic conditions. But also, how can you improve them in terms of what of their educational conditions or their skills? How can you go in about that? So one, you can go into what you call the training courses, which you call them skill developments. Or you can also have the Sibizanani Ngangama Upper schools in terms of what remembering their level of education. Most people leave school very early and they go to work in farms. And with their level of education being very low. Maybe some drop out in grade 7, some drop out drop out in grade 6. So if you can have a system of education that can help them to do what? To improve their skills in terms of what? In terms of literacy, then you are at the point of doing what? Of increasing productivity of your workers. But also into saying now, how can we improve now their social or their environmental conditions? One, you need to have better housing. Those houses should be safe and secure. That is to say that they should have running water and electricity. Remember, they are working very long hours in farms. So they need to come back to what? To better housing facilities where they can rest. But also you need to have recreational facilities. So you need to have a place where they will sit after a long day's work and have chat. Maybe you have a pool table, you will have maybe a soccer field where they will stretch after a long day's work. But also you need to give them what? Special protective clothing. Remember that they are working in what? In very unfavorable working conditions. Maybe it's too cold in the morning, you need to give them protective clothing. If they're working in dairy, you need to give them safety boots or you need to give them what amalgam boots so they can prevent their food from catching water because they're working what in a damp environment. Providing transport to and from work. If they're not living inside the premises, you can also do what? You can also provide them transport to and from work. In so doing, you are improving their social or their living conditions. But also, workers are very sensitive if they work in an environment whereby they are not recognized. So also one of the key things to having their production increased, you can manage labor in a very fair way. That is to say, to delegate tasks. You can have what I call task delegation. So if you are to delegate a task, it gives someone that sense of belonging in an institution to say that I'm being trusted, I can do this and that. So by delegating tasks, it says that you trust them enough to conduct those activities, even in your absence. So keeping promises and prompt decisions. So you need to keep to your words as a manager. Dealing promptly with grievances and conflicts. You are dealing with people of different backgrounds, and each and every person is unique. They've got their very own ways of life. So in a working environment, they might clash. They might clash in terms of what of their opinions. So as a manager or as a person in charge, you need to have a proper way in which you deal with their grievances and conflicts. That is to say that you do not have to take sides when dealing with grievances. You need to find the root cause of the problem. So, but also having processes in place to deal with issues that require disciplinary action. So they need to know the channels to follow when doing what? When they are dealing with those issues. So also, workers are governed by law to say that there has to be some legislation that one needs to abide with when dealing with what? When dealing with labor issues. So we're now going to look into some of the labor legislations that are very important in agriculture. So we look into saying that we've just looked into those that we think or that are very important in agriculture that affect the labor force. The first one is to say that we've got Labor Relations Act. That is Act number 66 of 1995. And we need to note this to say that we need to encourage our learners to say that they need to include the correct year. Because if you say it's Labor Relations Act number 55 of 1997, then you are wrong. So they need to have the correct act number. Also, they need to correct what? They have the correct year. Or else they need not to put in the year. They might just say Labor Relations Act rather than putting the wrong act number and the wrong year. So also what we need to note is to say that they need to put capital letters in labor. They need to put a capital letter also in R for relations, and also a capital letter in A for what? For act. That is of most importance. Those should be in capital letters. So it's Labor Relations Act, but we're also looking to saying that what does each act deals with? To start off with the Labor Relations Act, what does it deal with? It deals with involvement of employees in the decision-making process. Remember that the most crucial time in any business or in any working environment is whereby you need to adjust salaries. And there is a policy which says they should be reviewed or they should be adjusted yearly. So they need to have a say into saying that if those are being discussed, they need to have what? They need to be involved. And also they need to take action in what? In unions, and also they have got the right to strike. So this gives them rights to strike, and it gives them rights to do what? To affiliate in any union of their choice. Remembering that in farms, there are less of such cases whereby you find them being in trade unions. So it is their right to do what? To be affiliated to any union or to any organization of their choice. And they've got the right to strike. We also look into Basic Conditions of Employment Act, that is Act number 77 of 1997. Act number 75, of 1997. So one, we need to look also into saying that what does this deals with, or what does it speaks to? It's to say that a method of payment, that is to say by cash or by check. And also it deals with minimum wages. Remember that the government has also set what we call the minimum salary wage that each and every employee in each and every sector should receive. It speaks to that as well. So it should be clean. Hours of work. Remember in farms we said that they work very long hours and they've got very few hours of leave. They've got very few days off. So that also needs to be included with basic conditions. Overtime, that also needs to be included. Even in the contracts, it has to be included with how much overtime is one working. Okay, but what else needs to be included? It's a leave. So with leave, be it a maternity leave, be it an annual leave, or be it a family responsibility leave. All those are covered under basic conditions. Working on Sundays and public holidays. We know that by law, if at work on a public holiday or on a Sunday, it is said that you should get your double pay for the day. It's a double pay on a public holiday on a what or on a Sunday. So that is stipulated under basic conditions of employment. Termination of employment. It is also covered under basic conditions of employment. That is to say that how much notice, how much time notice. In other words, it's a time notice that if you are to leave work, how much time are you going to give to your employees so that I will be leaving in October, so that for the whole month of September you are looking for a suitable replacement. So it is covered under basic conditions of employment. Then we look into Occupational Health and Safety Act number 85 of 1993. People often confuse this with Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. Those are two different things because they cover two different things as well. So with Occupational Health and Safety Act, what does it cover? Number one, it covers safety in the workplace. Okay. And also it speaks to protective clothing. That is to say, if you are a machine operator, you are to operate a machine wearing the correct PPE, personal protective equipment. You need not to work without the protective clothing. But also it deals with training of workers to operate machinery or equipment. So this is covered under Occupational Health and Safety Act. Right. That is to say that if you are working using a machinery or you are using a certain equipment, you need to be trained for that. Because once you get injured, the first thing to be asked is, were you trained for that or not? So if it says you are not trained for that, then this act now comes in, which is Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. Now, this one deals with who, or it deals with what? It applies to employers and employees who are injured whilst on duty. That is to say that maybe they are being injured, or they are disabled, or they are killed as a result of a workplace accident or disease. So by law, each and every company should submit what we call the reports annually to say that how much incidents or accidents have they had over a period of maybe six months or over a period of a year. That is to say, is it still safe to work in a particular environment or not? But also, a compensation fund was established to receive payments by employers. So employers contribute to a compensation fund. So in other words, there is a portion that the employer gives to the fund to protect one in case they are injured or disabled during work or at a place of work. So also it is said that this payment is made to employees when due. In other words, after we have filed in your claim, then this payment is paid to you. And also, it is said that an employer must register with the compensation fund so that they can be able to access these funds. But also, the other part that we're going to look at is what we call the Skills Development Act, which is Act number 97 of 1998. What does this one speaks to? Its main aim is to educate and train the workforce. That is to say that each and every person that is working should have a proper training for that particular piece of work that the person is doing. So this speaks specifically to what? To training and also to what? To educating workers on the type of work that they are doing. Over and above that, it is said that by law, once you have hired someone, you need to have a binding document. You need to have this binding document which does what? It binds two parties. It binds the employer and the employee. These are binded by what? By the employment contract. That is by law. You cannot employ someone without giving them a contract of their employment. Now, when we look into that, it is said that the terms of contract must comply with Basic Conditions of Employment Act. You need not to compile your own contract that is not in line with Basic Conditions of Employment. But also, it must comply with specifications for farm workers, which is called Sector Determination 13. Sexual Determination 13. It should be in line with that as well. What is it that should be included in that particular contract of employment? Number one, it should include the employer's details and employees' details. That should be included in what? In the employment contract. Which living due to some personal reasons, you need to give a notice of some sort. A 1 month notice or 2 months notice. Wages. Remember, we've got wages and so we've got what? Also got what we call salaries. Wages are paid weekly. Salaries is paid monthly. So that also needs to be included in what? In the employment contract. But also it also includes in allowances. Which are these allowances? Like maybe a housing allowance or car allowance. That should also be included in the employment contract. If you will receive those, it should be included. But also hours of work and the meal intervals. It should also be included that you will work 5 hours or you work 7 hours, and in between your hours of work, here are your stipulated meal intervals. Leave benefits. It should also be included that how much leave are you going to receive? Annual leave, sick leave, family responsibility leave, maternity leave, and so forth. It should also be included in there. Other benefits, which might be those benefits. Maybe you are receiving uniform. It should be included that you will also give you uniform. That is another benefit. But also, signatures of both parties should appear on what? On the document itself. Now, if we are to look into how are these assessed in the exam, we have questions of this nature. That is to say, explain how the farmer will increase labor motivation and productivity under the following headings. For example, training. How is the farmer, or how is this going to increase labor productivity? So by training, we know now that by training, you receive or you get a skill of a particular piece of work that you're doing. And through training, it is said that you are being capacitated for the work. So it is said that trained workers and educated workers produce more. So social conditions, we covered that into saying that you need to have proper housing, but also you need to have transport for your workers if there is a need for that. Economic conditions, how can you improve that? Remember, we said that you can pay them fair salaries, you can give them bonuses, but also you can give them farm products at what? At discount prices. So that is covered under what? Under increasing labor productivity. But also it says differentiate between the type of workers in agriculture. Now there is what we call skilled labor now, which I said it is also one of a key to saying that skilled labor is not a type of labor, but it is what a class of labor. It's a classification of labor. So by casual labor, remember what you said earlier. I said this person is employed only for what? Only for a specific task, and they do not have a contract with the employer. They work less than 24 hours a month. So we have what we call the seasonal labor, which are only employed during peak periods, such as during harvesting. But what is a skilled labor? A skilled labor is someone who has undergone formal training for a particular skill or for a particular piece of work. Then that person is what we call what a skilled labor, is skilled. But someone who has not undergone formal training is regarded what as being semi-skilled. So that is what we call what a skilled labor. So now we also said that labor has got issues associated with it, which amongst other them include that it is what we call HIV and AIDS. Then it says now how write down 4 impacts of HIV AIDS on how you can address them. You see now on how you can address them. Remember what we spoke of earlier. We said you can have those awareness campaigns, you can have those sessions with them, which you call them, you can have social groups where they can relate to. And also remember we said with these to address them, they can have access to condoms and stuff. But now describe the function of the following methods in agriculture. Now remember we covered this in terms of legislation, but beneath this I think there is another one that speaks to the employment contract, which speaks directly to those. Now let's look into this now, the contract of employment. Okay, right. Remember what you said earlier. I just need to look at the contract and the signature first. Yes. Remember what you spoke of earlier on when we said that when you speak of an employment contract, it is said that it should have the information of both the employer and the employee. So now look, who is the employer? Here is the employer. It's Nemokula, the employer. And here is who? Here is the ID number of who now? Still, this is the employer, but beneath, you now have the employee. You now have the employee, the particulars now of the employee. So these should both appear on the employment contract. But also, remember what you said, job title should also appear. So what is this person doing here? Is a spray operator. That is the job title. Now, duration of contract, it's 1 February 2018 to retirement. So now this speaks to the type of labor now. So we can be now sure that this labor is what? It says from 2018 to retirement, which says that this person is a permanent labor, this one. This is a permanent contract. Because this person will work from this day till the person retires. So it speaks not to the type of labor that you are employing. But also, mode of payment, how much you are going to receive. It is said that he's going to receive monthly salary by check. So it should appear on the contract. But also, how much is the person getting? 3,500 rands. But let's look at the working hours. Working hours is from 7 o'clock in the morning to 17 hours in the afternoon. The person is receiving how much? 3,500 rands a month. Let's look into leave. Basic condition of employment. It's what we addressed earlier. It's 1 week paid leave per annum. So a year, this person only has got what? 1 week paid leave. Protective clothing? None. Remember, it is said that it should be stipulated whether the person receives some benefits or not. So remember also it said that there should be signatories for both the employer and the employee. They should also both appear on the employment contract. Now let's look into this activity. The activity speaks directly to this employment contract. So there are signatures of both the employer and the employee. Now, it is said that indicate the type of labor who signed the contract above. Justify your answer. Remember, it says the type of labor who signed the contract above. Okay? The type of farm worker. That is the type of labor who signed the contract above. Justify your answer. So, by looking at the contracts of employment, to me, I should say the person who signed this contract is what? Is a permanent labor. That is all I can say. If I can justify, how am I justifying that? It's because of the duration of contract. It says from 2018 to retirement. It says that the person what is permanent. Okay. If we can move on to the next question. The next question now says, select an item from the contract of employment that relates to the following legislation. From the employment contract now, what speaks to basic conditions of employment? So from the contract, we can say that what speaks to basic conditions of employment, we can include, amongst other things, it's a leave, is covered under basic conditions. Also, wages or salaries are covered under basic conditions, but also working hours are covered under basic conditions. So those are covered under basic conditions. Now it says, from there also, explain what is covered or pick one that is covered under Occupational Health and Safety Act. From there, what you can see, what is being covered in the Indogaban, protective clothing. This person is a spray operator, but is not provided with protective clothing. So that speaks to what? It speaks to health and safety. So it's called Occupational Health and Safety Act. The person was provided with what? With protective clothing. So it speaks directly to what? Now, from the contract again, it says, identify an aspect that speaks to scarcity of farm workers. Motivate your answer. By going straight into the contract, there are a few things that one might pick that speaks to scarcity of farm workers. One of them is what we call a leave. So this person is only getting 1 week paid leave per annum. So that speaks to what? That speaks to scarcity of what? Of farm workers. Working conditions. Also, working hours. This person is working from 7 a.m. to 17 hours p.m. But how much money is the person getting? 3,500 rands a month. So that speaks what? To scarcity of what? Of farm workers in what? In agriculture. So with those being said, I think we've covered quite a mouthful under labor as a production factor. I'm not sure if you've seen with us. If maybe there are any questions that you need to put forward, you can do so. But if not, then you can move on to management as another production factor. So are there any questions as of now?
Okay, colleagues, we are looking at the last portion of our presentation for today. So we're looking at management. So basically, when we're speaking of management, we are looking at a combination and a coordination of human, physical, and financial resources to achieve a specific goal, which is to maximize profit. So when we're speaking of management, we are taking these three production factors and then we're putting them into action. So this production factor can never be effective if we do not have land, labor, and capital. We start to manage when there is land, labor, and capital, and then we start to coordinate the three, and then we use it to maximize a profit. So there are a couple of duties and the principles that are expected from a manager. So when it comes to management, number one of the duties of a manager is to do planning. Planning can be done on day-to-day basis, or planning can be a long-term planning. Implementation. Whatever that you have planned on a farm needs to be in motion. So when we are taking a plan and put it into motion, we call it implementation. And then control. Control, it is whereby it's a feedback function. We are trying to look if what we have implemented has helped us to achieve our plan. What was our plan in the first place? So when we're implementing what we have planned, did we achieve the results that we were expecting? So these are the three principles of management. But then when we are measuring performance, we are measuring it against a particular standard. It's not about us implementing our plan, but to also put the standard into consideration. So now, once we are done with these three principles of management, we need to do monitoring of the farm. So farm activities are done daily. So a farm manager is expected to be at work on a daily basis. So number one, when we are doing monitoring, we check the production level. How much milk did we harvested on a day? How much were we expecting to have on that particular day? Is our production increasing or is our production decreasing? So how do we do monitoring? One of the methods that we use, we keep the records. So now our records, they assist us when we're doing decision making. One of the records that we speak on is financial records. Remember, through income statement, we can be able to tell if the farmer is making profit or the farm is running on a loss. Through the livestock records, we can be able to tell if we are managing the farm well or not. If the mortality rate is high, then we can never say our plans are implemented well and then they've got a positive feedback. So now, when we look at the records, we can be able to make decisions. Are we good at running this enterprise, or we need to change and look for a different enterprise? And then this is done daily. Remember, we said on daily basis, we record the money coming in, and then we record the money that is going out. So we do the labor records. So when the workers are arriving in the morning, they sign. So a manager goes to the time book and then they check who is present and who's absent. This person has been absent for quite a number of time. We can be able to tell through labor records. Livestock records, we look at the sales, we look at something that has arrived, and then we also look at the mortality rate, the natality rate as well. And then what is it that is sold, and then we do the record on the inventory. And then we've got a strategic management. So when I'm speaking of a strategic management, it's a long-term planning of a business. It's a long-term planning. It is not done like daily, but we do daily to achieve our long-term plan. So what is it that you are doing when you are doing a strategic management? Number one, we develop a vision. A vision, it's an aim of a business. Why are we starting this business? Then it's going to reflect on the vision. So each and every business that you get into, it has got what we call a vision statement. And then once we've got a vision statement, the question is, how are we going to achieve it? And then we develop what we call a mission statement. A mission statement, it states how the business is going to achieve our objectives, our goals. As I'm standing here in the teacher center, this is their vision, and then it has been stated here in their mission statement. So in your schools, there is a vision, and then there is a mission. Their vision is this, and then they're going to achieve their vision through their mission. And then from there, we do goal setting. So our goals, they are much broader than the objectives. Our objective is what you want to achieve, maybe in a day or in a week. But the goal, it's a long-term achievement. Then that long-term achievement needs to be smart. Colleagues, we need to mention this to learners. In one exam paper, there was this question that says, what is SMART stand for? And then I was very happy that my learners will get a 4 out of, it was 5 marks. And then none of them get it, because they said they were not expecting it from agric. So the goal needs to be specific, it needs to be measurable, attainable, realistic, and then it should have a time frame. So when the goals are SMART, measurable, attainable, and realistic, so it becomes very easier for an enterprise to achieve their goal. So now let us look at the activity that we can use from what we have learned. Number one, it says the statement below shows the strategic management steps to develop a business strategy. A, promote business competitiveness and extend its operation to meet the global demand. So basically, with these statements that you see on the board, you need to say, is this a vision? Is this a mission? Or is this a goal setting? Then you name it. So we can give it to our learners. They can quickly refer to the summary that has been given to them, and then they try to give answers. And then give 2 reasons why do we need to do is SWOT analysis. Why do we need to develop a vision, a statement, and then send an goal setting in a business? And then number 2, we've got a scenario. It says a group of individuals was accepted for land reform program. Their application was successful because of their ability to set up a budget, organize, and make decisions. These individuals commented on it, and when they realized that legislation governs the production and marketing environments in agriculture, this impacts directly on the profits and available capital of the farming business. So now, what is it that is expected from a learner from this scenario is to name 2 managerial principles that the group needs to follow in order to succeed. So we speak of the 3. Number 1, they need to come up with a plan. Number 2, they implement the plan, and then they control. Refer to the passage and identify 2 external forces that may impact on the farming enterprise. What are the 2 forces that are not within the business that might affect in a farming enterprise? So now we've got factors that can affect a business. These factors, they can hamper or they can strengthen the business. So they come in 2 forms. Number 1, we've got the internal factors and then the external factors. Our internal factors are factors that are within the business, and the business can have a control on those factors. And then our external forces, they are outside the business. The business cannot control those factors, but they can hamper or they can strengthen the business. When we're looking at the internal forces, number 1, availability of resources. How much resources does the business have? Once we've got a shortage of resources, no matter how good the planning was, the business can never be successful. So it is a duty of a manager to do what? To organize. When the manager is organizing, the manager is looking for the resources that we can have, that we're going to need to achieve our plan. And then the manager also needs to coordinate. So when the manager is coordinating, he's bringing together the resources so that the business can be able to achieve whatever that is their plan, or whatever that is their vision or their mission. Available and capabilities and competence of workforce and manager. So how competent is the workforce? If the workforce is not competent enough to fight with the surroundings or to compete with the other businesses, then the business might suffer. If the workforce is competent, then the business will stand. More especially, the manager needs to be very competent and capable so that the business can be effective. Organizational structure and culture. So each and every institution that you come across, there's this thing that we call organogram. How is the institution organized? Who's doing what, when, and how? And then what is the culture of the business? We all teachers, but then different schools has got different cultures. That culture comes from the organization. How organized are we? What is our organizational structure? Farm's financial position. So how much money does the farm have? Is it running on a loss? Is the farm making profit? And then if it is making profit, then the business is going to be strengthened. But if the business is not making much profit, then it's going to run on a loss. Investment in research and development. So a farm manager needs to be able to do what? To do a research so that the business can be able to develop. If the business is not good in doing research, eventually the business is going to sink, because the business needs to adapt to a changing environment so that it can keep on running. And then we've got external forces. External forces, the first force is economic force. So we usually see on TV, so that fluctuation, we do not have control on it as business owners, but it does affect a business. If the rand is doing well, then the business is going to be strengthened. If the rand is not doing well, then the business is going to be hampered. Political forces. The business has got nothing to do with politics. But once there is political instability, then eventually the business is going to suffer. Ethical forces. What is it that our customers believe in? So that can affect the business. For an example, if we start to sell our product only to find that the surrounding environment is dominated by Muslim, and then they need a halal, then the business is going to suffer. It's got nothing to do with Muslims. By the ethics of the surrounding environment, it affects us. As a result, when you go to KFC, they also advertise themselves as they are selling halal, because they've noticed that the ethical forces is affecting the business, and then they need to adapt to the environment. Legal forces. Mr. Nguni has mentioned it. So even if you are running an agricultural enterprise, we are governed by the legislations. So these legislations, they can strengthen the business, they can have the potential to weaken the business as well. Socio-cultural forces. What is it that the society believes in? Even if the business is doing well, but then if you are violating the socio-cultural beliefs, then the business might start to suffer. Technological forces. How equipped is the business in terms of using technology? If the workers are not well educated, that will limit the usage of technology. And then, as the whole world is run through technology, the business will start to suffer. Environmental forces, the natural disasters. The natural disasters, they can weaken the business. If we have floods, we cannot control the floods, but they've got a potential to weaken our business. Diseases. If there's a disease outbreak, then we cannot control and say the disease must not affect us. But then they can. It's just that we need to come up with some means. So they've got a potential to weaken or to strengthen the business. So we've got different sources of risk. These are factors that affect the business. Where do they come from? So we refer to them as AMA risk. AMA risk, they've got a negative occurrence in a business. They can damage, injure, or give us a loss that will have a negative impact on a business. So AMA risk, we categorize them into three. We've got technical risk, we've got market risk, and then we've got financial risk. Technical risk. This is more related to natural occurrences. Number one, under technical risk, you've got unpredictable climatic conditions. In grade 11, we did mention that before we start to do any agricultural activity, we need to do the weather research. So now, even though we have done the weather research, the unpredictable climatic conditions might occur due to the fact that there is global warming. So at the end of the day, we cannot exactly predict how the weather is going to be. Then that will affect our agricultural business, because usually our agricultural business are done in an open environment, so we are mainly depending on the weather. Drought and flooding. When it is dry, our plants need water, our animals need water. But then when there's too much water as well, the plants and animals might start to suffer. So the drought and floods turns out to be a risk. Disease outbreaks in crops and livestock. Remember, we spoke of diseases. We said we've got those that are epidemic and those that are pandemic, and then they also affect livestock and crop production. If we try to cure them, they're such an expense to a farmer, so they've got a potential to weaken the business or to strengthen the business. Insect infestation. Insect infestation, a very common example, is konya. So it can, those animals, they can come in numbers, and then they damage the crops, and then that turns out to be a loss in a farm. Another risk that you are having is a market price risk. If our produce has happened to be able to survive this, then after this we take them to the market. What is it that is happening in the market? If we go to the market, it's not only our products that are sold there. Other people bring their product to the market as well. So once there is a high supply in the market, the price needs to be reduced so that we can be able to cope with the competition. Once there is a new product that is entering the market, the demand can be reduced. People always like to try new things. So once there's a new product that is entering in the market, and then they are already familiar with our product, then we are going to suffer, because the demand is going to be reduced. And then we've got a financial risk. Our interest rate. Remember, when we're speaking of capital, we said the capital is expensive. So our interest rates, they are changing from time to time. That affects the money that we have obtained from the banks through our loans. And then it also affects the credits that we have, and then our profile when we are going to acquire our finances from the financial institution. And then production might be below, making it difficult for farmers to pay debt. So when we are planning and making our business, our management strategy, we usually have the yield that we are expecting to cover. So sometimes due to changes, the production might be low, and then it becomes very difficult for us to pay our debts. Remember, for us to pay the monies that we owe, we are mainly relying on the production that we obtain from a farm. So what is it that we can do to keep on surviving, even if the world is changing? So we need to come up with the risk management strategies. So those risk management strategies are listed here on the board. But then, what I want us to note is that since we've got three types of risk, one management strategy can work on another risk and does not sustain us on another risk. The first management strategy that we have, we've got insurance. So when we are having an insurance, we can insure our livestock and then our crops as well. So that when there's an infestation, then our crops are safe. Then the business is safe. Whenever there is livestock diseases, then the business remains safe. So we are insuring against the risk. We can also insure our business, our buildings as well, against the risk. When there is flooding and then the milking parlor is damaged, then we know it has been insured. So even though there is a risk, but then we've got a strategy to manage the particular risk. And then we've got diversification. When we're speaking of diversification, we are looking at a farm that is working on two enterprises at once. Previously, we spoke of a pig farm working together with a horticultural farm. We were producing vegetables. So how does the diversification works? Let's say we've got a pig farm and then the vegetable farm. On a pig farm, there's swine flu, and then our pigs die in numbers. The vegetable farm will sustain us. The cash will keep on flowing up until the pig farm is being in a good position as well. So that is what we call a diversification. A specialization. A specialization, it is whereby we are focusing on one enterprise. But then if you are to do a specialization, you need to do one enterprise and excel on that enterprise. If you are doing dairy production, then you must be good at it, or maybe be excellent on it, so that you minimize the shortfalls that might occur because of poor management. Maybe you're good at it so that you've got very low mortality rate, then the business is giving you a good profit. And then value adding. Value adding, it is whereby we are processing our product. Let's say we are taking our product to the market, and then we found that other farmers had bought their product as well. And then our product might not be prone to perishability because we're going to convert them into a different produce. Like we're going to can our peaches, we're going to use them to make a salad. So in that sense, we're adding a value. Enjoy flexibility. Use the buildings that can be used for other different purposes than to look at them as that can be used for a single purpose. For an example, when you go to Rainbow Farms, they were having good houses, but then when Rainbow shuts down, those houses were demolished. Reason being, they cannot be used for anything else other than a poultry house. So if only the construction was suitable for piggery farming or for cattle farming, then we are going to convert to Rainbow from being a poultry enterprise and make Rainbow to be a pig enterprise. So that is what we're speaking on when we're speaking of flexibility. Managing financial risk. We manage financial risk through savings. So when things are going well, then we save for rainy days. So if we've sold more stuff this month, then we need to save for the other months when we will be not making much profit. Contract production. Contract production can assist us to minimize the market risk. When I go to the market, only to find that somebody else is supplying the market with a certain produce. I'm on contract with these people. I said to them, I'm going to give you 100 millis every month. So even if there's a new person who's coming into the market, you can never say to me, this month I'm taking 80 millis because I'm going to buy 20 from a different supplier. So when we're on contract, I know exactly what to supply people at what amount. So this minimizes the problem of oversupply. So I know exactly what to manufacture and whom to supply. And then there is hedging. In hedging, we sign future contract with our suppliers. So now, us as a business, we sign future contracts with our suppliers. For an example, we've got somebody who's supplying us with fertilizer. So we say to the person, we're going to buy this fertilizer at 50 rands for a period of 5 years. Whether the manufacturing of the fertilizer is increasing or decreasing, we're going to buy the fertilizer at 50 rands. That was our contract. A very good example of hedging. When your child is going to school and then he's starting grade 8, the school fees is 10,000. If you come with 50,000 and say, I'm paying for this child for grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, then you've paid. If the child is doing grade 9 and then the school fees are 12,000, that won't affect you. You've paid for your child, and then that is what we refer to as hedging. I think that will simplify it. And then we need to develop a business strategy. So how do we develop a business strategy? A business strategy, we develop it through what we call a SWOT analysis. So in SWOT analysis, we look at the strength of a business, the weakness, the opportunities, and then the threats of a business. So all these things are included in business plan. What is our strength as a business? What is it that you are good at? And then our weakness, and then the opportunities that you are having, and then the threat. So when we are speaking of this analysis, we analyze ourselves against other businesses that are surrounding us or that are giving a similar produce, so that we can be able to cope with the external factors that can affect the business. And then for a manager to do all the things that we speak on, the manager needs to have good managerial skills. So the most common managerial skills, it should be leadership, a positive attitude, creativity, and ability to overcome ama barriers. So these are the qualities that you are expecting from a manager. But then, we've got the general business management skills. This, the manager needs to have it. But then for a manager to manage the business, need to have a conceptual skill. A conceptual skill, the manager needs to do the research and see if there are any changes that are taking place in the industry, and then develop new strategies to address them. Let me make an example. The Department of Education is changing. So now most of the things are done electronically. So it's a duty of a manager to notice that there is a change that is taking place. And then we as a school, how are we going to cope to that change? Are we going to need to introduce the computer studies so that our learners can be familiar with the computers? Are we going to need new equipment? Are we going to install smart boards in class so that the teachers can stop to using the chalkboard and cope with the changing environment? So what is it that we are using? A conceptual skill. We are referring to the change, and then we develop our strategies to adapt. Analytical skill. Analytical skill, once the information is given to a manager needs to be able to do what? To analyze the information and then meet the future demands of a business. Ability to apply knowledge. Once you know something, what is it that you are going to do with what you know? So we call it a knowledge application. Planning. A manager must be able to plan on a daily basis and on a long term. That is what we refer to as strategic management. A manager must be able to solve problems and make decisions. The manager must not postpone the problems up until they become agent to solve them. As soon as the problem arises, the manager must make sure that he or she attend the problem and then take good decisions. Ability to adapt. When the environment is changing, the business must be capable to adapt to those changes. Financial management skill. A financial management skill, the manager obtains it through the keeping of farm records and accounting skills. So, farm records and accounting skills. The sheets that we have studied when we're doing capital, that is what we call accounting. So, when a manager is capable of compiling all those skills, of all those sheets and balance them, then the manager is good in accounting. He or she can manage the finances. Interpersonal and communication skill. So the manager needs to build up good relationship with the workers. And then a manager must be able to communicate the vision of the company. Once there is no communication, we cannot know as workers what is it that is expected from us and how are we going to achieve it. So a manager must be able to communicate the vision as well as the mission of the business. And then the production and operational skill, the use of machinery. You can't be a manager and you can't read or write. Because when the machinery arrives, it comes with a manual. So you need to be able to read the manual and then be able to operate the machine. If the manager has got a problem of mechanical skills, the problem of using the equipment and machine, that means the production of a business is going to be low. Remember, technology is more efficient than men. So if we're going to rely on men because the manager does not have mechanical skills, that means our production is going to be very low. So we need someone who's got the technical skills. Now let us look at how is this assessed in the exam. So we've got a scenario. A farm manager may experience an oversupply of produce to the market if there is similar supply of produce by other farmers. This may lead to a drop in the price of the produce and a subsequent loss of profit. Question number 1. Identify external forces that may lead to the situation in the scenario above. So these can be affected by the ethical forces, it can be affected by the culture of the environment, it can be affected by the politics. These are the economic forces. These are the forces that are outside the business, but they can affect the business. State the type of risk that may be encountered by the manager in the scenario. The manager might have a problem of financial risk. Financial risk will occur as a result of oversupply. When there's a new produce in the market and then the demand will drop, and then we're going to have what we call an oversupply. When the surrounding farms are supplying the same product, then we're going to have a problem of oversupply. Give the reason for answer in 3.2 by referring to the scenario. This scenario states that the oversupply will occur because of the similar produce by other farmers. So now, for the business to meet the demand, they need to throw up the price. We're still going to look at it when we're doing marketing. State 2 management strategies that the farmer could apply to lower the risk. Number 1, the farmer can be on contract. Number 2, the farmer can do what we call hedging. And then another method that can be used here, it's value adding. We convert our primary product into secondary product. Suggest 2 components of management that could make the farm manager on the scenario successful. The farm manager